Recent rhetorical exchanges between the U.S. and Russia indicate a frighteningly real possibility of a serious escalation of the war of Ukraine may be just around the corner. A number of NATO and European officials have again stated that the U.S. and its allies may soon allow Ukraine to use Western weapons, including long-range missiles, to attack targets located inside Russia. Backers of the idea include Secretary of State Antony Blinken, most Republicans in Congress, including the Speaker Mike Johnson, and many members of the foreign policy establishment, including Victoria Nuland, former Deputy Secretary of State. And there have been 2 attempts recently to take out Russia's early launch detection warning systems, the systems that would notify Moscow of any U.S. nuclear missile launch in advance of that strike. If these attempts had successfully disabled the early warning systems, Russia would have been left naked before a possible U.S. first strike, which their military would most likely assume would follow immediately. Although Ukraine claimed responsibility for the 2 strikes, it's widely known that the only hands that could have planned and guided that mission belonged to Americans. To find out where we're really at and what's likely to follow, we go to Moscow to speak with analyst Mark Sleboda. Mark? What do you think is going on?
So as the Kiev regime, it becomes more and more apparent that the Kiev regime's, the NATO-backed Kiev regime forces are being absolutely trounced on the battlefield with much more to come.
They just lost 35,000 more troops, for example.
Yeah, so they managed to stabilize the Kharkov front by stripping units, individual battalions and companies from all along the contact line. And they managed to stem this rather small new Russian offensive in the northeast of Ukraine in the Kharkov region. But the cost of that was cannibalizing their own forces across the front line in the east and the south. And Russia has made many very important progresses, steps of progress, has finished up several long, fiercely fought battles. And I believe almost certainly what allowed Russia to surge over the edge so quickly in several of these places is the fact that they were denuded of troops and munitions and everything else. Everything was being sent to Kharkov to try to stop a relatively small, because as the Kiev regime's military intelligence chief, Kyrylo, I like the dark Budanov, said, they have no reserves left. Nothing. Right. They have the manpower shortage. Their manpower shortage, despite the new conscription laws, is so short. Of course, the amount of people they're able to press gang violently off the streets is far lower than the losses they're suffering every day. And in order to try to stem the flow of Ukrainian men fleeing, trying to swim across rivers and mountains to Romania and so forth, the Kiev regime started using American Claymore mines, American taxpayer provided Claymore anti-personnel mines to mine their own borders with Romania to stop their own people from fleeing the conscription press gangs, which of course is not going to stop people trying to flee. It's simply going to lead to more deaths of people trying to flee. So, and on top of that, the Kiev regime's defense chief, Ruslan Umarov, he has talked to Western media and revealed that Russia, what has long been suspected, we've talked about it before, that Russia has a whole nother army, a whole nother 300,000, volunteer contract soldiers that have now been trained over the last year and are ready to enter the fray. And he, at least, is afraid that they will be directed across the border from Belarus back in the direction of Kiev. much, much larger, like 10 times potentially larger than that token force that was sent in at the beginning of the conflict to try to force negotiations. This would be a real force to end the regime, if it's true. I have no doubt that the forces is there. What they'll be used for is another matter. So panic, desperation all over the West, all NATO's leaders, has led them to two what I would call insane escalations within the last week plus. The first is that there have been attacks on two of Russia's long-range, over-the-horizon nuclear launch early detection systems. They're nuclear warning systems that would alert them, for instance, of a U.S. Nuclear launch.
Right. We're going to poke your eyes out before a fight, and that, of course, that's not going to induce any anxiety.
Yeah, these systems are, they're of no use in this conflict. They're not being used. That's not what they exist for. Despite claims by the Kiev regime that they're legitimate targets because they're used to detect drones in the nearby region. Nonsense, complete nonsense. It has nothing to do with what they're used for. And the fact that they were attacked with Western advanced Portuguese drones and the flight that they would have had to be charted with AI assistance to avoid Russian electronic warfare jamming and Russian air defense is, 100% that this flight path was provided by U.S. NATO satellite and reconnaissance data. That's
NATO
the only way
is trying to take out Russia's air defenses. They can't.
No. More than air defenses, they're trying to take out their ability to detect a Western nuclear launch.
Understood.
They're playing games with the stuff that you don't play with. There is actually within Russia's nuclear use doctrine, Article 19C, attacks on the infrastructure that would inhibit Russia's ability to utilize their strategic deterrent, exactly like an early over-the-horizon detection system, are itself justification for a nuclear strike.
Use it or lose it. That's where you're at.
Right. I'm not saying this because I believe that Russia is going to respond to this insane provocation by NATO, by the U.S., quite obviously, with a nuclear strike. I don't believe they will. But it's just to punch home how serious this is. There's only really three possibilities. That this is some insane idea even of increasing the costs to Russia and making them believe that will bring them to the negotiating table earlier on terms more favorable to the U.S. Two, the second possibility is that this is some type of attempt either by the Kiev regime to provoke Russia into a dramatic escalation in response that would push a direct NATO military intervention, or more likely, because I don't believe that this could have been done without the help and approval of the United States, that this is the same type of provocation to lure Russia into a large retaliatory strike that would provide justification, basically a false flag, for the direct insertion of U.S. and other NATO state member troops into Ukraine. And then those are the good scenarios, right? What is the worst case scenario? The one that the Russian military can't ignore, that this is a deliberate systemic attempt to remove Russian nuclear launch detection to enable a first strike nuclear first strike on Russia. The logic being that NATO can't afford to use Ukraine. They have already factored in that they won't be able to beat Russia in a land conflict, a war of attrition in Eurasia on the ground. The Russian military is too strong. They've got too many responsibilities with China and Iran. They can't mobilize all their forces. NATO is a paper tiger, and that if they have to do something, and if they did that, they would lose, and the conflict would go nuclear anyway. So then you just take the middle steps out, and you say, we understand that this is going to go nuclear. Let's just go first and go all out, and that is a terrible kind of nuclear game theory logic. But that is the way that the people who are designed to do strategic deterrent have to think. Russia has to consider, right? Even if we don't believe that the U.S. is about to launch a nuclear first strike on Russia, Russian military planners, even if they don't believe it, they have to prepare for that potentiality and take steps against it, because you don't play games with strategic deterrence, and games are being played with strategic deterrence. The other one is the announcement of what has already been done. The announcement that the U.S. and other Western countries will allow their weapons to be used for strikes in Russia proper, pre-2014 Russia, if you want to say that, which is, of course, nonsense, because they've already long been used for that purpose. Right. But what has not been done is there have not been a deep cruise missile and ballistic missile strikes like the new long-range ATACMS, which it's obvious now was delivered for just that purpose. And this is the situation. When ballistic missiles and cruise missiles are launched into Russia, Russia may not immediately know what type of missiles those are being fired. And there are many missiles that have the capability of having both conventional and nuclear warheads, which Russia has to consider that every missile hurtling into Russia could potentially be that nuclear first strike. And then they have to make the split-second decision, do we launch our birds now while we still have a chance? Right. That is the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're beyond Cuban Missile Crisis. We are on the precipice of, well, the end. I mean, the
end.
Not going out with a whimper, though, going out with a bang.
That's right. That's right. T.S. Eliot.
That's where we are. And all because the West can't. They believe their hegemony is not even really about Ukraine per se. They believe their hegemony is on the line. Boris Johnson said that outright. Before, it's been U.S. global leadership is online. The rules-based order, we make the rules, we give the orders, is on the line. Now Boris Johnson said the quiet part out loud. Western hegemony, they believe, is on the line, and they refuse to live in a world dominated or even where Russia and China are equals. How far will they take it? Well, there's no sign they're looking for an exit ramp. They're only looking for that escalator going up, or if you want to talk about us all going straight down to hell, because that's another possibility if you just want to think of it in a different directional paradigm.
Thanks for the good news, Mark. Well, hopefully we'll all be here next week and to track this thing as it develops. And we'll speak with you again then. Thank you.
God willing.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.